All right, here we are again. Mara, Daughter of the Nile, Chapter 10. It's called The Lotus Garden. A strange man my bridegroom is, indeed, thought Inanni as she sank into a chair. From his manner, one would take an oath he is indifferent, even scornful. Yet it is not so. Did he not send those others from the room that I might be more comfortable? He is gentle at heart. He must be. She lay back among her cushions, reaching for a half-finished piece of embroidery that lay on the table beside her. The poppy pod draught had just been dispatched to the king by one of the chamberlains, and already she was wishing she had not been so hasty in its preparation. Now, again, there was nothing to do, save think about the audience just past and speculate about the next one. Surely he would not behave so oddly next time. She bent over her needlework, shoving out of her mind that first chilling scrutiny, under which she had felt she must sink straight through the gleaming pavement. That was naught but the effect of his headache, and so were the other strange contradictions in his words and manner. They must be. Mara had said so. Dear Mara, how warm she was, how comforting. After the marriage it will all come right, Inanni assured herself. The king and I will understand each other, and I will be a good wife to him, and comfort him when his head aches. Perhaps he would even let me go home sometime to see my brothers in the beautiful land of Canaan. The old hunger started up in her again at the thought of her home. The sheep would be coming in over the green hills right now, their bells sounding faintly on the evening air, their tired shepherd outlined against the sky behind him. Oh, beloved Canaan! Inanni looked up, biting off a scarlet thread, as Mara entered the room from her own chambers. At once the hunger receded a little. She smiled, holding out her hand in welcome. I have sent the potion, Mara. Come sit beside me while I embroider, and talk to me of the king. Do you think he was pleased? A little? In spite of his headache? Of course, my princess. Mara crossed the room with that supple, swinging walk of hers, and sitting down beside Inanni began to chatter reassuringly of Thutmose and the splendid life awaiting his spouse. How cool she is, how sure of herself, thought Inanni wistfully. I don't believe she is afraid of anything on earth, and she is not unhandsome, though of course she needs more meat on her bones to have a fine figure like my own. In Egypt, all women looked half-starved. That blue flower is becoming, fastened there just above her forehead. It makes her eyes look like two more blue lilies down below it. Odd, only a single blossom. For my own part, I would have made a great wreath of them, using dozens of flowers and plenty of ribbons as well, with my hair flowing out all around it. But perhaps that would have been wrong. Mara always knows about these things. Strange that I should have grown so fond of this Egyptian maiden, whom I did not even know existed 3 weeks ago. Gentle Ishtar, what would I have done without her in this frightening land? Though I know not what my brothers would say of her, no doubt they would think her glance too bold, for certainly she does not keep her eyes downcast as a maiden should, and has no meekness in her. As for her dress, Inanni blushed and looked away from the narrow garment with its fluted, flimsy sleeves, through which the lines of Mara's brown body were quite frankly visible. But that is the way things were done in Egypt, the princess thought nervously. It is not Mara alone who values coolness above modesty. The servant maids, that haughty queen herself. Inanni drew her shawl a little closer around her shoulders, reflecting that in some ways it was just as well her brothers had stayed at home in Canaan. If they had fully realized the wickedness to which their sheltered young sister would be exposed, they would have risen up to protest against this grand and wealthy marriage. Indeed, they would have. To Inanni's relief, the palace servants appeared at that moment to begin the elaborate ritual of serving the evening meal. She did not want to go on with her thoughts. to remember that whatever protests her brothers might have made, she would have journeyed to Egypt just the same. A Canaanite did not refuse a messenger of Pharaoh. An excellent dinner occupied both her thoughts and energies for a time. She was just beginning on her third pastry when Mara, who had finished some time ago, suggested an after-dinner stroll. It is pleasant to walk abroad in the cool of the evening, and there is a garden with a great pool of lotus which we must surely visit. I saw it from the roof pavilion this morning. Indeed, murmured Anani. She found she did not want the pastry after all. Of course, I have no objection, Mara, but will there be any Egyptians there? In Egypt, one must expect Egyptians, my princess, said Mara with a smile. But from the roof I saw no one but a gardener tending the flower gardens. I hardly think it will be crowded. But if it is a garden... Mara leaned forward on her elbows. My princess, it is important that you show yourself. It must not be said that the king's intended hides like a timid hare in her own apartments. No, no, of course not. It could not do. I see that. Let us go at once. I am ready. Dashdar, Jezra. I will not be afraid of these Egyptians, Anani thought. I must not be. But if only there were not so many of them, all looking at me out of their painted eyes. Moistening her lips and trying to ignore the tremors of nervousness in the pit of her stomach, she gathered her long robes around her, and with Dashdar and Jezra in reluctant attendance, followed Mara down the hall to the outside stair. At the bottom, they found themselves in the first of a series of walled courts and gardens, through which they passed without encountering anyone more frightening than a few slaves or hurrying servants. Anani began to relax. She peered curiously at the storerooms and shed-like workshops, catching glimpses of basket makers and glass blowers still at work, of 100 of stacked wine jars, mountains of baled linen, the neat rows of a kitchen garden. There were vineyards, date groves, curving flower beds in which scarlet sage and larkspur glowed against dark tamarisk trees. As they entered a broad paved area surrounded by weavers' stalls, Anani gave a start of joy and stopped. Mara, look at that woman yonder, she whispered. She who cards wool. Why, it is just that we do it in Syria. That means that's exactly how we do it in Syria. I believe she is Syrian herself. I do indeed. Look, you, Dashdar, is not that woman from our country? Mara said vaguely, Indeed, she may be. Come, let us go on. No, wait. I know she is Syrian. Ah, Jezra, do you remember old Ninurta, who taught us to handle the carter when we were children together? Eh, mistress, and this woman resembles her a little, as I trust in Ishtar. The same broad brow and the little downy mustache on the upper lip. How happy we were then, sighed Anani. Mara was fidgeting, saying something about the Lotus Garden, but Anani was lost in her homesick dreams. The woman with the carter looked up and smiled, and it was as if a small patch of Canaan opened up suddenly in this Alu land, with old Ninurta holding out a hand in welcome. I must talk to her, breathed the princess. She started forward, but Mara caught her elbow. Nay, Highness, we must not tarry here. But why not? There are other days to see the Lotus Garden indeed, Mara. I would rather sit a while with this woman from my homeland than visit 100 gardens. How kindly she looks at me. Perhaps she will let me ply the carter for a while, and we will talk about Canaan. Nay, wait. Mara seemed almost alarmed. She recovered herself quickly, drawing Anani aside. I fear you forget, Your Highness. Does a princess speak to a common weaver woman? Indeed, in Egypt this is not done. But she seems most respectable. She is beneath you. I know not what the son of Pharaoh would say if you so demeaned yourself. Anani flushed. I must learn to be Egyptian, she thought. The The king will be ashamed of me." She bent her shawled head and moved on in silence across the court. "It is, of course, possible," said Mara after a moment, "that you speak to that woman in another way. In your own apartment, perhaps. Yes, it would be quite proper for your highness to send for her." "Then why may I not speak to her here?" thought Anani. Mara's tone seemed strangely unconvincing, even distraught. Anani stole a backward glance across the courtyard at the Syrian woman's broad, kindly face and nimble fingers, away from which she was being led, almost hurried, at a pace hardly suitable to an evening stroll. What was the matter with Mara? Even now her smile was nervous, as if she were having to force herself to behave normally. Could it be that she was in a hurry and had feared to be delayed in the court of the weavers? It was a surprising idea, but though Anani did not see how it could be so, the more she thought of it, the more certain it seemed. They passed through the gate and stepped onto a wide pavement bordered by stone rams, the far end of which was blocked by high bronze doors and an armed sentry. "What place is this?" inquired Anani. "I believe it is one of the entrances to the palace grounds." Mara stopped, her face quickening with interest. "It is. Yonder doors pierce the great walls themselves, and on the other side is Thebes. Princess, I would love to walk abroad in that city. A place of marvels it must be." "Mara, come. That sentry is ogling you," whispered Anani, tugging at Mara's sleeve in embarrassment. Mara's eyes shifted to the sentry, measuring him so coolly that the princess hurried on, scandalized, across the pavement. Mara shrugged and followed. He is not so handsome as he thinks he is," she commented. "Come through this wicket now. I think this is the hedge which borders our Lotus Garden." Anani was glad to dodge in anywhere away from the sentry's bold grin. But as they pushed through the last gate, he vanished from her mind. Her first impression of the Lotus Garden was of vast sweeping lawns and the sparkling of water. Her second, of a throng of people. She shrank back in dismay. But Mara had already started down a path strewn with powdered lapis lazuli, and there was nothing to do but follow. The place was almost a park, spacious and well-watered, dotted with clumps of palms and acacias, under which nobles and their ladies lounged. Beside them were low tables laden with beribboned wine jugs and bowls of fruit. Behind them, slaves waved great plumy fans. Dominating all was the long lotus-shaped sunken pool in the center of the garden, blue as heaven with countless lilies. Their perfume filled the air. "Is it not beautiful, Highness? Is it not all I said and more?" Anani mumbled assent, hoping she did not appear as gawky and countrified as she felt. The whole court of Pharaoh must be gathered here to take the air. 2 gossamer-clad ladies sauntered by, their fashionable blue-wigged heads like heavy flowers on their fragile necks, cones of slowly melting perfume, ointment resting atop their curls. The fragrance of myrrh drifted by with them. A coal-black Nubian in a slave's shanty crossed the path, carrying a wine jug and a bouquet of golden cups. "Lift up thy head, Rose of Canaan," came Mara's low voice. "Do not mind a few stares. Remember, it is not every day these lesser folk may gape at one destined to be the bride of royalty." Mara's words were reassuring as always, but her manner was preoccupied. She was scanning every part of the garden, a faint frown between her slanted eyebrows, the very lily on her forehead quivering with tenseness. Again, and stronger, the notion returned to Anani that her interpreter had business of her own in this place. Was she meeting someone? Perhaps a sweetheart? Why, she could have told me, thought the princess. I would have understood with all my heart. Mara turned just then, touching Anani's arm to guide her into a branching path. Her hand was like ice. Perhaps not a sweetheart, worried the princess, Perhaps someone she fears. They were making their way to a stone bench under a big acacia tree near the pool's edge. It was in plain sight of the rest of the garden, but some distance from the nearest group of courtiers, to Anani's relief. She sank down gratefully upon the bench and allowed Jezra to pour her a cup of wine from the flower-wreathed jug nearby. It had been no short walk, and when one possessed a fine, statuesque figure with plenty of curves, one got out of breath easily. It was a good rest. "Shall I pluck you a lily, my princess?" Mara murmured. Without waiting for permission, she moved down the grassy slope and stooped to the froth of blue flowers in the water. Rising a blossom in her hand, she stood a moment to sweep the garden with yet another searching glance. Anani found herself peering this way and that, frowning into clumps of trees, though what or whom she sought she did not know. At that moment, a light step sounded on the path behind her. She turned quickly. A tall figure was approaching through the shadows under a clump of palms. On the slope, Mara stopped short, then with a visible effort continued her unhurried walk back to the bench. She was breathing quickly as she bent over Anani and offered the lily's fragrance to her nose. "Here is thy lotus, princess. Drink of its perfume and forget tomorrow. Our sages tell us—" A smooth voice speaking Egyptian interrupted her. She straightened, then stepped aside. Anani found herself looking into the long, impenetrable eyes of a richly dressed young nobleman. "Is this he, then, whom Mara expected?" she thought. But he is speaking to me. Who is he, Mara? What does he say?" "Highness, may I present His Excellency Lord Sheftu? He wishes to know if your Highness finds our country pleasing." He must be the one, nevertheless, thought Anani, else Mara would not clasp her hand so tightly. "Tell him it is very beautiful, though far different from my homeland." Mara spoke, and the young lord listened courteously. He was the same, Anani realized all at once, who had stepped up to the queen's throne this morning to receive some order. How attractive he was, to be sure, except for his beardless jaw, shaved clean as a baby's after the strange Egyptian custom. Anani narrowed her eyes, trying to picture him with a luxuriant Syrian beard. The results were exhilarating. Ah, if this were Mara's young man, she had reason to breathe quickly. But of course he could not be. After all, since he was a great lord, and Mara only a hired interpreter. It was very confusing. "My lord wishes to inquire if you enjoyed your audience with the king," Mara was saying. "Oh yes, indeed. His Highness was very kind." As Mara turned back to the young Egyptian, Anani noticed that her tenseness was now pronounced, almost as if she were bracing herself for something she dreaded. Was she in love with the Sheftu, or in mortal fear of him? Anani could not decide. Evidently, what she was trying to tell him was of the gravest consequence, but he would not let her finish, and his voice was stern in spite of his mask of casual interest. Can they really think I believe she was only translating my one little remark, thought Anani, almost amused. Of course she might not have expected had she not guessed Mara was coming here to meet someone. It did not take more time to say a thing in Egyptian, as Mara had explained this afternoon. Think how many words the king had used to make statements that were quite short and simple in Babylonian. A strange man, the king, scowling through his courtesies, but that had been quite different. Mara and this Lord Sheftu were actually talking of their own affairs. The young Egyptian made a remark, turning graciously to Anani as he did so. She had opened her mouth to say that she had no objections to their conversing privately, that they need not pretend, when another thought struck her like a blow. Suppose it had not been different this afternoon. Suppose there were such dissimilarities in the language. Suppose Mara and the king had been pretending too. "Lord Sheftu inquires," repeats Mara, "if you find the wine to your taste. Will you not answer, Highness?" "It is very good," said Anani mechanically. Impossible, she was thinking. There could be no reason, but she almost felt numb. The chef-Jew was not interested in the wine. He was watching Mara out of the corner of his eye. Just so had it been at the audience. The king's manners be speaking one thing and his words another. Before Baal it was so. They were all deceiving her, thinking her too stupid to understand. And she had been stupid. She had believed, because Mara told her to believe, because she wanted to believe. My lord inquires whether you enjoyed your journey, Highness. What? Yes. No. It doesn't matter what I say, she thought. They're not listening to me, only to each other. I am of no importance, and the king... Ah, Mara, why did you deceive me? That was the part she could scarcely credit yet, that Mara would lie to her so callously. But she must have. It explains everything strange about the audience, the king's scowls and his honey's words, even his restless pacing. It was true. Therefore all she had been told was untrue. Thutmose was not kind. He was scornful and arrogant, as his first terrible scrutiny had indicated. He was not pleased with his intended. He despised her. I want to go home, thought Anani, closing her eyes. Oh, gentle Ishtar, let me go home to my homeland. Somehow she got through her part of the brief conversation, never knowing what was said. Before long, the young man bowed and went away. For some time, Anani sat in silence, slowly, very slowly, accepting the truth. Mara, in the act of offering a platter of sweetmeats, bent over her in concern. My princess, are you ill? No. But you are tired? Come, we will go back to the palace. It has been a long day. Could she be pretending still? Thought Anani as she gathered her shawl about her. No, her voice is warm and sweet. Then why did she do this to me? Perhaps only to be kind, that I might not know my bridegroom scorns me. Bridegroom, alas, he will never marry me. They walked slowly up the rise to the main path. The light had faded. A few pale stars showed overhead, and the courtiers were drifting out of the garden. The fragrance of lotus came to Anani's nostrils, and the peace of the evening touched her with a gentle hand. Perhaps, after all, it is just as well, she thought. I could never have learned to be Egyptian and wear those thin dresses and look down my nose at humble folk. The king would always have to be ashamed of me. Still, if he had let me, I could have been a good wife to him and comforted him when his head ached. But he does not want that. It was to never be. I wonder why I was brought here, to live in loneliness, to no purpose? I suppose I shall never know. Someday, perhaps, when all their planning and struggling has spent itself, they will forget about me, and then I shall be allowed to go home again, down the river to Canaan. No one will care then. They will not even remember. You are very quiet, my princess, came Mara's worried voice. I trust I have not overwearied you. Anani smiled at her, shaking her head. Poor Mara, it was she who was weary, with all her scheming and struggling. I will let her know I think nothing of this, thought the princess, and help her with her pretending, that her secrets be not such a burden to her. Doubtless she, too, is caught in a web she cannot escape. But for Anani, the struggle was over, and the fact brought a queer sense of relief, which grew in her as they walked slowly through the dusk toward the gate in the hedge. Even the sidelong, curious glances from painted eyes had lost some of their power to hurt her, she discovered. It did not matter now what Egyptians thought of her. She did not have to win a place among them. Tomorrow, she thought, I will go alone to see the woman carding wool in the court of weavers. It will be good to talk of home. And that concludes Mara, Daughter of the Nile, Chapter 10.